All right, hello, this is Hannah Goodson. I'm going to go over my final project. So for the first question, are there any differences in geographic distribution of the observations by species? So yes, there are some differences. I would say they are more common than different. Using the pivot table, you can look at how each grid compared with each species. So one thing I found is that while they were all very concentrated in southern Athens, southern and central Athens, there were some distinct differences. So for the yellow rumped warbler, so this one here, it was very concentrated centrally and southern, while the brown-headed cowbird was far more widespread, so it wasn't as centrally located. And then the northern flicker seems to be a balance between the two geographically. And for all of the species, you see little sightings in western and northeast Athens, which is probably due to few forested areas. But to look at you have to look at the different values. So you can see that the northern flicker, you might think, oh, there's more of those than the yellow rumped warbler, but actually that's not true. If you look at the values, the maximum sightings was like 1,600 for the northern flicker, while the yellow rumped warbler was like almost 3,000. So, definitely there are some differences, but geographically they're fairly similar, which is to be expected because you would most likely see birds in forested areas. And then question 2, where are the hotspots of observations for one of these species? So kind of going off that first question, so northern flicker is the one I focused on, and then I just used my pivot table and did an ascending order, and I found that the three highest grids were G23, G10, and G4 with these respective sighting numbers. So then I used the base map and identified to identify the location of these grid cells. So I went ahead and labeled these grid cells because it gets very confusing. So this was G23, G10, and G4. So for G23, as to be expected, this was north of Athens off of Commerce Road. And as to be expected, it had a forested area, and I found that it was right over Sandy Creek Park. And then G10 was in southern Athens, where the Loop and Village Avenue intersect, which included Oconee River Forest and Memorial Park. And then finally G4, which was just south of the Loop, at the intersection of Village Avenue and Whitehall Road. This included the State Botanical Garden. So next, I'm going to explain a concept that relates to this project. So VGI, Volunteer Geographic Information, is basically a way to collect geographic data through individuals, so almost like a crowdsourcing type of method. And while there are issues with this, in this situation with, bird sighting, yes, there could be some data that is incorrect, but generally I would say that the biases and the issues that come with VGI are limited in this case. And obviously, how is this relevant to our research project? We would not have been able to do this project without VGI because that's what we were mapping was the sightings. And without this application eBird, we wouldn't have been able to do that. Another concept, data classification. So data classification is basically a way to organize your data into different categories so that people can better understand what you're talking about or better make see relationships and things like that. So here, this is just a little image that I found, but there's different ways you can do it: equal interval, quantile, manual, or natural breaks. I chose natural breaks because the data was very widely spread apart, and when there's a wide range, natural breaks works well with that because it kind of groups them naturally within the data. So it's like data specific. And this is specific to our project because we had to do this in order to make our maps presentable and readable to any user. So that concludes my project, and thank you for a good semester.